getting up north.
So what's going on everyone, and welcome back to another video. Now today's video, as you can see, it's not going to be like the usual content. It's going to be very much focused on doing a very quick before and after of this particular car, and hopefully going through a few pointers as well for those people that are looking at washing the car to speed up the process, but also try and keep it as contact free as possible to avoid any additional swirls or scratches being added to your paintwork. Now this isn't going to be a full and true, this is how a professional detailer would do it kind of video, but this will definitely give you hopefully some pointers and maybe even some shortcuts that you can take or that you might be willing to take, like I am when cleaning a car. So as you can see by those quick snippets that you saw earlier, the car's filthy. I have been completely neglecting this particular car as we've gone through the winter months, and I'm continuing to do so. So without further ado, let's jump into it and hopefully I can give you a few pointers. So as you can see, I'm using the Demon Machine sort of pre-wash, if you like. This softens up the dirt, really tries to break it up, and just makes it so much easier when you come to jet wash the car. Now I do recommend leaving this to sit as long as you can. Not too long obviously, but you know, a good 3-4 minutes before jetting off the car. Always do a quick pre-jet if you can, but in this instance I was in a little bit of a rush, wanted to just get the car washed and finished, completed as quickly as possible. So I decided to use the pre-wash first rather than a jet wash and then the pre-wash, and then I'll obviously follow it up with a jet wash. But ideally you'd want to do a jet wash before, then the pre-wash, then another jet wash, just to try and loosen off the surface dirt, and then the pre-wash, the Demon Machine, will try and eat at anything that's sort of stuck to the paint and stuck to the body of the car. As you can see, I spent quite a good amount of time on the areas that would see quite a lot of dirt hitting them, so on the wing mirrors, around the back as well where dirt gets sort of like wafted up and sticks to the back of the car, and around the front bumper. So those areas I paid specific attention to. The next thing I did was I used the Turtle Wax Redline alloy wheel cleaner. That's got like a colour reactive sort of formula. It eats away at the iron particles that could be embedded in the paint in the alloy wheels. Really good for removing like brake dust and, you know, all the usual sort of road grime that gets stuck on wheels. And the wheels are normally really difficult to clean, so I'd recommend running over as well the wheels with the jet wash prior to using the alloy wheel cleaner, and then jetting them off again. And then you could even come back to them a second time with the alloy wheel cleaner and then use a brush to really get at the difficult spots of road grime and brake dust and things like that could be really hard and embedded into the alloys. And so I've just gone over it again with the wheel cleaner and another coating of the Demon Machine road and grime stuff, just to try and eat into it just a little bit more, especially on the front, because it was just blathered. It's not looking bad though, I swear. Even the dented door's looking a bit better. But look at all that just bleeding out of the wheels where I've been scrubbing it. Crazy. So after you've got all the grime off, or as much of the grime off as you can, that's sort of my first step, if you like, the first stage that I do. Try and get it all broken down as much as physically possible. And then I move on to trying to, you know, soap up or lather up the entire body. You can do this two ways. You can do this with a nice big foam cannon, you know, and get a nice snow foams, they call them, and get that all over the car, plastered all over, and you can leave that again for another 5 or 10 minutes. Personally, I find that a little bit time consuming. So what I prefer to do is to get hands-on now with the car. I'm confident personally that there'll be enough taken off the car, grit, you know, grime, and all that sort of stuff that can cause swirls, that now I can get hands-on with the car. But what I will be using things like these. So I'd be using brushes that have very, very soft bristles, and using these detailing brushes, and also a wash mitt that's microfiber on both sides. So you've got, this is a bit softer of a microfiber, and it can be quite aggressive, but it's very, very soft, and it gets into all the little crevices and cracks and in between like your panels and things like that. Really good for grills as well, I've noticed. So I'd use something like that now, where I'm not using a sponge. Sponges can hold grit and gravel and things like that. And I'd be getting hands on with the car, using the brushes to go down like the seams, like the water channels in the roof, for example, around like the headlights, in the grills, things like that. The very sort of intricate areas I'd be using the brush for. And then I'd be using the mitt all over the car, working from top to bottom, just like you do with the jet itself, because what you're doing in that instance is you're pushing the muck and the water down the car. The water will flow down the car and take all the muck with it. So if you go from the top to the bottom with the jet, and from the top to the bottom with the mitt, you'll be taking that grit and grime down the car, and then as you jet it off, it'll all come off the car, or that's the theory anyway with working from top to bottom. Just like if you were dusting a house, you know, you'd want the dust to fall down the blinds as you do each individual blind, etc, etc. So that's what I mean by getting hands on now. Wouldn't use a sponge as I say, because they do hold grit. I'd also be using a bucket with a grit guard. Personally, I don't use the 2 bucket method. I find that again too time consuming, and if you're using a single bucket working down the car, doing wheels very, very last as well, by the way. I do use the same bucket of water for the wheels, because the paint on the wheels is much firmer, much harder. I just find it much, much easier. It's much, much simpler, much faster to use 1 bucket with a grit guard, very important, and use the wash mitt. Frequently rinsing it out. The more frequent you rinse it out, the better. Less chance of putting scratches and things like that on the car. But that's what I do. I don't use a double bucket method or even a 3 bucket method, and I certainly wouldn't ever throw the bucket over the car, because then all your grit and your grime in the bottom of the bucket, you're throwing that on top of the car. It's not clean. It's going to scratch the paintwork, especially if you then come to dry the car with a drying towel. Now, one thing worth mentioning that I didn't even realise that I did myself until I just did it is try and go directional with your sweeps with your mitt. That way you don't get swirls in the paint. If anything, you'll just end up with a single line if you catch something, rather than multiple directions, which is normally harder to remove as well, by the way. Now, when you've jet washed all this off, all the foam off, everything else, gone round all the crevices with the brushes and into all the intricate details with the mitt, this is the stage then where you can correct the paint. Now, I don't personally need to, and another tip that I'll offer you is that if you do have some small patches with scratches and things like that, sometimes you can get away with just T-cutting those particular areas. Now, T-cut, very frowned upon in the detailing world. However, I find it's probably the best, you know, like small spot rectification sort of polish, if you like. It's very quick, very effective, but it can burn through your paint very, very quickly. If you do want to do a full correction, I wouldn't recommend using T-cut at all. It's not something that you'd use for a full correction on a car at all, nowhere made. But what you would do is you would use it on like your door handles, you know, that way nails and things like that can catch on the paintwork. I'd use a bit of T-cut in that area with, again, a nice microfiber or a polishing pad, and just try and get those, you know, small light surface scratches out. T-cut, in my opinion, is very, very good for that particular stuff. Now, I've jet washed all the car off. My next sort of tip, if you like, or top trick that I use to try and save time, as I mentioned, is that ceramic wash. The ceramic wash, if you don't have time to give your car a full wax, that ceramic wash that I've just used on the entire car does give it not a very good coating, but it does give it a little bit of a coating. I'll show you what I mean right now. That's not very safe. Try and get that out from under there. Water just falling off the car into the power supply, the extension cord. Here we are anyway. You can see the bonnet and you can see how it's beading. Really, really nice. Even though I've not put anything on it, this is just from the ceramic wash and wax. So really, really good if you're in a rush and you just want to give your car a quick clean. And here's a quick example of how the beading shows itself really. You can see it. So yeah, it's not perfect, it's not brilliant, but it does definitely work. So really, really good if you're in a little bit of a time crunch. So the next and final thing is the Turtle Wax wet ceramic wax. Now, this in my opinion is one of the best wet waxes that you can get. It's very, very comparable to the Dodo Juice Future Armor. If you're not familiar, I did a review on the Dodo Juice at Futurama against the Meguiar's ceramic wet wax. By far killed the Meguiar's did the Dodo Juice, and this is just as good if not better in my opinion. I'm still to do a comparison. I'll have to buy the Dodo Juice again and do a direct comparison with this and the Dodo Juice, but this Turtle Wax ceramic wet wax, brilliant. You can apply it wet, doesn't have any problems. You dry it off and it's got a full ceramic coating, and this will probably last on the car 2, maybe even 3 weeks before the beading completely stops and the clear sort of protection coat on the car, the protective ceramic coating if you like, completely fails. So not like a proper ceramic coating that can last, you know, a year plus, but certainly something really easy, really convenient, really fast as well, that I use all the time and I love it. You know, I think it's brilliant for your average weekend warrior. So that's going to conclude the clean of the car. I hope you enjoyed it. It's a little bit of a before and after, a little bit of a process that I go through, and this is probably the quickest cleaning sort of process that I do on my own personal car. You know, this isn't cutting any shortcuts in my opinion that aren't worth cutting. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't done so already, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.